The elevator stopped between floors 7 and 8, and she looked at the ceiling for a moment, and then she looked at me, and she said, "I've been waiting 2 years to be alone with you." I want to be precise about what the elevator was doing at that point, which was nothing. No movement, no hum, no sense of imminent resolution. The display above the doors was showing a number that was not quite 7 and not quite 8, which is the mechanical equivalent of a shrug. And the emergency phone had produced, when I lifted it, a recorded message informing me that my call was important and would be answered shortly, which is also what it had said 8 minutes ago. And 4 minutes before that, we had been in the elevator for 12 minutes. 12 minutes is not long in most contexts. In a broken elevator with your professional adversary, a woman who has been for 2 years the most consistently aggravating and impressive presence in your working life, 12 minutes is its own complete unit of time, with its own atmosphere and its own rules. And somewhere around minute 10 those rules had apparently shifted. I looked at her. She looked back. Her expression had the quality it sometimes had in the moments just before she made a decision in a meeting, a kind of arriving, the face of someone who has done the calculation and accepted the answer. She said, 2 years, 3 months, and, she checked her watch, 11 days, approximately, since I transferred in. In case you wanted the full number. I said, Priya. She said, "Don't tell me I'm wrong." I said, "I'm not going to tell you you're wrong." She held my look for one steady moment. Then she turned back to the doors and said, "Good." I'd have found that very unconvincing. We stood in the stopped elevator for another 6 minutes before maintenance arrived. I spent approximately all of them reconsidering the last 2 years from a new angle. The view was different from here. My name is Daniel Cross. I'm 36. I'm a senior strategy consultant at a firm that advises companies on how to grow without losing what made them worth growing in the first place, which is a more difficult problem than it sounds, and one that I find genuinely interesting. I am precise, competitive, and have a documented inability to walk away from a problem I think I can solve better. This created certain difficulties. Her name was Priya Mehta. 33, she had transferred in from the firm's Singapore office 2 years and 3 months ago, with a track record that made the partners say her name in that particular way. Weighted, careful, as if placing something valuable, and a reputation for strategic thinking that was either exactly as advertised or somewhat overstated, which was the question I had been quietly investigating since week 1. It was exactly as advertised. I established this within a month and found it, against all reasonable expectation, more interesting than if it hadn't been. She was composed in every professional situation I had observed her in. Not the performed composure of someone suppressing feeling, but the genuine article, the composure of someone who had decided what mattered and arranged themselves accordingly. She asked questions that arrived 2 moves ahead of the conversation's current position. She wrote strategy documents that were so clean in their structure that reading them was slightly annoying, because the clarity made every alternative feel approximate. She had dark hair she kept pinned back in the office, and she wore almost every day small gold stud earrings. Nothing elaborate, just the studs, both of them, until she was thinking through something difficult, at which point she would remove the left one and hold it between her thumb and forefinger while the thinking happened, and replace it when she'd arrived somewhere. I had noticed this approximately 3 weeks in and had never mentioned it. It had become, without any agreement, one of the things I knew about her. The tension between us was professional in origin and had never, as far as anyone in the office was concerned, than anything else. We disagreed publicly and productively. We had been assigned to competing pitches 4 times, collaborative projects 3 times, and a joint client engagement once that had lasted 6 months and produced results that the client called exceptional, and that we had called, privately and separately, the most exhausting professional experience of our respective careers. The exhausting part, I had been working out slowly, had less to do with the client than with the 6 months of sustained close proximity to someone whose mind worked in a way that made me want to argue and agree simultaneously, which is a specific and inconvenient cognitive state. I had managed it by keeping it in its box. I had become, over 2 years, expert at the box. I had the box under control. The elevator broke on a Tuesday afternoon in October, and the box became somewhat less useful. It began the way things begin in tall buildings, with one bank of lifts serving 12 floors, with waiting. We had been in the same client debrief, which had gone 40 minutes over, which meant the usual post-5:30 emptying of the building had already happened, which meant when we reached the lobby-level lift there was nobody else waiting, and neither of us made the obvious social maneuver of suggesting the stairs. This was, in retrospect, information we got in without discussing it. She pressed 8. I pressed 8. We did not comment on this. The first 7 floors were normal. The elevator moved with its usual efficiency. We stood at the standard professional distance, not close, not pointed far, the distance of colleagues who have long since stopped needing to establish it consciously, and she was looking at her phone, and I was looking at the floor numbers, and everything was exactly as it always was. Then floor 7 happened, and the elevator made a sound like a mechanism reconsidering its choices, and stopped. She looked up from her phone. I looked at the display. We both looked at the doors. "Right," she said. "I'll try the phone," I said. The phone produced its recorded message. I reported this. She nodded and tried the alarm button, which made a sound that suggested it was functioning as designed without suggesting that anyone was listening. We both looked at the ceiling, where the lights were on and entirely unhelpful. "Maintenance will have a call-out," she said. 20 minutes probably. "Probably," I said. We stood in the stopped elevator. Outside, somewhere, the building went about its business. Inside, it was very quiet. She was the one who broke the silence, which I should have expected, because Priya Mehta was the kind of person who made decisions about silences, who decided which ones to let run and which ones to interrupt and when. "The Ellison pitch," she said. "What about it? You changed the pricing model in the final presentation." She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the doors. From the version we'd agreed on. "You went lower on the implementation tier." "I had a conversation with their CFO the morning before," I said. "He'd flagged a sensitivity. There wasn't time to." "I know," she said. "I found out afterward. I spent 2 days being angry at you for it. You didn't say anything." "I was angry," she said, with the slight precision of someone explaining a thing they have already resolved. "I was working through the evidence. When I had the full picture, I stopped being angry." She paused. "You should have told me. We were working jointly on that pitch." "Yes," I said. "I should have." She turned and looked at me. "That's it? You're just agreeing?" "You're right. I should have called you that morning. I made a judgment call about time, and I should have called you anyway." She studied me for a moment. "You're very difficult to argue with when you do that," she said. "Do what?" "Just agree, when you know you're wrong. Is that a complaint?" "It's an observation," she said. "Most people argue anyway. It's a waste of time." She turned back to the doors. "You don't do that." "Neither do you," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "No, I don't." Something in the elevator's stopped air shifted slightly. I noticed it, and catalogued it and said nothing. Around minute 8, she took out the left earring. I noticed because I always noticed. She was holding it between her thumb and forefinger in the way she did when the thinking was happening, and she was looking at a point on the elevator door that wasn't the door so much as whatever was behind it in her head. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes, the Morrison Review. Last February. You recommended me for the lead position. I had been waiting, in some form, for 2 years for someone to raise this." "Yes," Amir told me. He said it unprompted, which was the only reason I found out. She looked at me sideways. "You didn't tell me." "It would have been strange to tell you. Why? Because we were in competition for the same position 6 weeks earlier. It would have sounded like something else. What else? Like I wanted something from you for it." She looked at me properly now. "Did you?" "No," I said. "You were the better fit for that engagement, and recommending you was correct. That's the whole of it." She held my look. "Daniel," she said, "in 2 years I have not been able to work out whether you consider me a rival, a colleague, a problem, or something else entirely. I have significantly more data than most people would need to arrive at an answer, and I still do not have one." She put the earring back in. "That is not a common experience for me. My chest did something it had been doing occasionally for 2 years, and which I had been successfully reclassifying as professional respect." "What would you like the answer to be?" I said. "That's not how I work," she said. "I don't decide what I want the answer to be and then evaluate evidence toward it. I evaluate the evidence and arrive at the answer." "And?" She looked at the stopped display above the doors. "And the evidence," she said, "across 2 years and 3 months, has been pointing in a direction I have been professionally unwilling to act on. Because we work together. Because the structure of it is complicated. Because I made a decision when I transferred in that I was here to build something real, and I wasn't going to compromise that." She was quiet for a moment. "And then the elevator broke, and here we are, and I appear to have run out of reasons to keep the evidence to myself." That was when she said it, the thing she'd said at the beginning of all this, the thing I had been sitting next to for 12 minutes while maintenance was called, and the recorded message played, and the building went about its evening. "I've been waiting 2 years to be alone with you. Not as a confession of feeling, not as vulnerability, not in a voice that asked for anything. In the clear, level tone of someone stating a fact they had been in possession of for some time, and had decided, finally, that the right person to give it to was me." I looked at her. "You could have made that happen," I said. 2 years ago, you're the most intentional person I've ever worked with. You could have engineered alone with me any time you wanted." She looked at me with something that was almost a smile. "Yes," she said. "I could have." "Why didn't you?" "Because I didn't trust myself to handle it correctly," she said. "Because the work mattered and I didn't know what this was yet, and I wasn't going to act on something I hadn't understood. And because—" She stopped. She looked at the doors. "Because I wanted you to have time to arrive at it yourself. I didn't want to be the thing that happened to you. I wanted to be the thing you chose." Something in me stopped being careful. I had been careful for 2 years. I had been careful in the specific way of someone who has built a very good professional case for not examining the personal case. And the professional case had been solid. It was still solid. It was still true. And I had known, somewhere underneath it, that the personal case was also solid, and was patient, and would keep. She was looking at the doors. Her jaw was set in the way it was when she'd said the true thing, and was waiting to find out what it cost. I said, "Priya." She turned. "I recommended you for Morrison," I said, "because you were the right choice, and because I would have recommended you for anything you were the right choice for, because watching you work for 6 months on the joint engagement was the best professional experience I've had at this firm. And the hardest, because it is very difficult to compete properly with someone whose thinking you respect completely, and I had to keep reminding myself to stay in my lane." She was very still. "I've had your earring pattern memorized for 20 months, I said. "Left one first, when you're thinking. Both back in when you've arrived somewhere. I have never mentioned this because there was no professional context in which mentioning it was appropriate." I held her look. "That is not professional data. That is personal data. I've been keeping it in the wrong category." Something moved through her face, not the composed thing breaking, but the composed thing becoming unnecessary. The scaffold coming down from a building that was finished. "You could have said something," she said. "You could have engineered a loan with me 2 years ago," I said. The smallest pause. Then she looked down at the floor and made a sound that was, unmistakably, a laugh, short and real and entirely unlike the professional version. "That's fair," she said. "I know." She looked up. Her eyes were doing the thing they did when the evidence had landed, and she knew where she was. "What do we do with this?" she said. "What do you want to do with it?" "I want to stop keeping it in the wrong category," she said. "But I want to do that correctly. I don't want to compromise what we've built professionally because we were impatient about this. Neither do I." "So we're careful," she said. "We're careful," I said, "and we're honest, with each other and with the structure of it." She nodded once, a decision made, a direction set. She put out her hand, not for a handshake, just open, flat, the way you extend your hand when you want someone to know you mean it. I put mine in hers. We were standing like that when the elevator started moving again, the mechanical hum returning from wherever it had been, the display resolving itself to 8, the doors opening onto a corridor that was quiet and lit with the low light of end of day. We stepped out. She let go of my hand. We walked to our respective offices and collected our respective bags and met at the stairs because neither of us said so aloud, but neither of us was getting back in that elevator. On the pavement outside, she said, "Dinner, not a working dinner." I said, "Yes." She said, "Thursday." I said, "Yes." She said, "Good," and walked toward the tube. And I stood on the pavement for a moment in the October dark and recategorized 2 years of data in approximately 40 seconds. And then I walked home, and I was smiling the whole way without making any particular effort to stop. 3 months later, the managing partners were informed. This was handled in the way we handled everything, directly, with documentation, with a clear statement of how it would and would not affect our work. The managing partner who received this information looked at us for a moment and then said, with the air of someone confirming a long-standing hypothesis, "We wondered when this would happen." Priya said, "What do you mean, wondered?" He said, "Priya, you've been arguing for 2 years." She said, "We argue because we disagree about methodology." He said, "Yes," in a tone that contained a great deal more than yes. She did not find this as amusing as I did. She recategorized it eventually. A year later, when people ask how we got together, she tells the elevator story with the accuracy and completeness of a case study, the specific time of day, the floor numbers, the sequence of the conversation, the exact sentence. She does not embellish. She doesn't need to. I tell people that the most significant strategic decision of my professional life was keeping the earring data in the wrong category for 20 months, because it meant that when the elevator stopped and the right moment arrived, I had 2 years of evidence to give her, and she had 2 years of evidence to give me, and there was nothing approximate about either of us. She says that's the most romantic way anyone has ever described a filing error. I say it wasn't an error. It was delayed deployment. She takes out the left earring. She puts it back. She's arrived somewhere. She always has. What would you have done if someone told you they'd been waiting 2 years to be alone with you, and you realized, standing there, that you'd been waiting too, just in a category you hadn't named correctly yet? And have you ever kept something in the wrong box for so long that the right box felt like a new discovery, even though the thing had been there all along? Tell me in the comments if this one found you. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.